right. Hello and welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. Want to ensure that people have their audio preferences dialed in before we get started here. All right, that seems like a pretty good critical mass, and I'll make sure that I type this all out for people that are joining a bit later, don't have their audio settled completely yet. But welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few technical details. If you haven't joined us for an AACRAO webinar before, we use Zoom webinar, which is very similar to Zoom meeting with a couple key differences. The first and biggest one, as you probably already noticed, is that your cameras and microphones are disabled by default. So you don't have to worry about interrupting us, but that does limit the way that you can interact. The first is a pretty familiar one. You can use the chat window. That defaults to hosts and panelists. So if you send something without changing that to everyone, then only the hosts and panelists will see your message. So if you have a comment or if you want to discuss something with everybody else, just make sure you select everyone from the drop down there. And then the other option is the Q&A button. If you press that, you can enter your questions. You can ask those anonymously and other people can view and upvote those questions and even comment on them. So that's where we prefer, given the volume of attendees that we have today, that you put all of your questions. If you have any other technical issues, feel free to reach out directly to me in the chat and I'll make sure we resolve it as quickly as possible. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to our moderator for the day, Jasmin.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jasmin Saidi-Kuehnert. I'm president of the Academic Credentials Evaluation Institute in California and president of a nonprofit organization, the Association for International Credential Evaluators. I also chair the International Education Standards Council that oversees AACRAO's electronic database on global education, and many of you know it as EDGE. Joining me today are four distinguished individuals who over the years have been steadfast in their efforts of exposing bogus institutions and diploma mills offering fake degrees. Our four presenters share a long history of combating diploma mills. Some have worked with the FBI, some with college licensing and other government organizations, but all share a passion for unearthing and shutting down the providers of fraudulent degrees. And all of the individuals participating today, myself included, were authors in the recently released publication, Guide to Bogus Institutions and Documents. This publication is available through the AACRAO bookstore. As everyone here today knows, evaluating educational programs and documents is a difficult and complex issue, with lots of decisions as to the validity left up to the recipient of the potentially fraudulent document. Today, you will learn some of the many red flags that might alert an admissions officer to the possibility of fraudulent or misleading documents. To that end, we will first hear from Alan Contreras, who was previously an administrator of the State of Oregon's Office of Degree Authorization and who is widely acknowledged to be one of the country's leading experts on diploma mills. He will share some of the basics of degree granting authority and who issues the authority to grant degrees. Next, we have Professor George Golan, who in the early 2000s worked tirelessly with Operation Gold Seal to shut one of history's most notorious degree mills. He will share the incredible story of bribery and deceit that led to St. Regis University infiltrating the Liberian government and how the school was ultimately taken down. Alan Ezell, a retired FBI agent who specialized in education fraud and was in charge of the 1980s diploma mill sting operation known as DipScam, will share the history of Axact, a massive and still very active empire of fraudulent schools and degrees operating out of Karachi, Pakistan. He will also offer tips for recognizing schools under the Axact umbrella. Lastly, John Bayer, who has been using his writing and research to shut down diploma mills since the 1960s. He will reflect on his time fighting diploma mills and how the problem is as rampant as ever. We hope this presentation will offer viewers the information and tools needed in order to fight the complex battle against this type of fraud. Any of the resources that the presenters mentioned today are accessible through the registration page of this webinar, or can be requested directly from the Publications Department at pubs, that's PUBS, at accrao.org. Now we will begin with Alan Contreras. Alan.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm glad that people could be here today. It seemed to us that before we get too far into the fascinating and unpleasant world of fake degrees, it's helpful to start by clarifying what makes a degree genuine to start with. A degree is properly granted, that is to say, it's not fraudulently or mistakenly granted by an entity that has the legal authority to do so. And a clear line can be drawn between degree grantors that have that genuine authority to issue degrees and entities that don't. So in order to understand the difference, we need to figure out how a genuine degree grantor gets the formal authority to give someone a degree. So some of that is in much more detail in this little book, and you'll see another image of that later. And the acquisition information is also available on the website from AACRAO later, and I think in the chats for this event. But I'm going to just go over things briefly. A degree is a type of credential. It's what we call an academic credential. It's a public credential. A public credential is distinguished from other kinds of awards and recognitions in that it is used outside private life for a particular purpose. And society has various kinds of public credentials. Degrees are one. You'll also see some public credentials that are extremely well known that are not degrees, but some people think they are degrees, and so we have to sort that out. The most common of those are RN for registered nurse and CPA for a certified public accountant in the US. Those are professional certifications, but they are not degrees. They come from a state licensing board or some similar entity and let you practice. So people who hold them will have degrees, but the RN and the MBAs and things like that are not themselves degrees. The most important thing to remember when you're looking to figure out if a degree is genuine is that in order to be genuine, a degree has to be issued by an entity that has the authority to do so given to it by a government. There's no such thing as a private right to just up and issue degrees anywhere in North America and in most of the world. That's really true in almost all of the world. There are some oddball exceptions like Belgium maybe, but that's about it. In the US, there are three sources for the legal authority to grant degrees. Those are from the Congress, which has done so for 25 or 30 institutions. That includes most of the ones that are chartered to operate in District of Columbia. And it includes the military academies, that sort of thing. Fairly small number. There are the states, which authorize over 4,000 degree granting institutions, and that's the commonest. That's the norm. That's the way most institutions get their legal authority. And then finally, there are institutions that are chartered by a federally recognized Indian tribe. And there are, last I checked, about 34 of those. And those are just as legitimate a government authorization as the states or the federal government. So you have those three sources. And if it can't show that it's been authorized by one of those three sources, then an entity that's claiming to have the authority to issue degrees probably doesn't have that authority, and you can push back on that. There's one little exception for some religious schools that I'll talk about in a minute. So the states do what they do in three main ways. They're public institutions, which the states own or are owned by a subdivision of the state, like a community college district. And those are chartered, or they're established by the state legislature, or they're licensed by a state agency, but they are a public entity. There are non-public institutions, both nonprofit and for-profit, that are almost always either chartered or have a license from a state agency. And then there are a small number of institutions that are exempt in one way or another from a state's laws or partly exempt from those laws based on the fact that they are a religious entity of some kind. That's where some problems can happen, but that list is out there. Only about half of the states allow that. And I'm going to talk about non-publics because that's where the issues tend to arise. The establishment by charter is mostly an older method. It can still happen. It just hasn't been a very common method since maybe the 1920s or so. What the charter has to do is establish the institution by name, and it has to give the institution the authority to issue degrees. If all it does is say that the entity can teach classes, that's not the same thing. And you get a few gray area cases there that you have to sort out. But the authorization to issue degrees is a very, very specific thing. The religious exemption is the fuzzy one. And in that situation, some of those institutions have a specific authority to issue degrees. Some of them, it's not really there. You have to figure it out. And some of them, the authority exists only if the institution does a certain set of things or is accredited or something else. Examples of some actions that do not confer authority to issue degrees include actions by accrediting bodies. There's a misunderstanding about what accrediting bodies do. They cannot grant an institution the authority to issue a degree. In fact, in order to become accredited by a federally recognized accreditor in the US, the institution has to prove that it already has authorization from Congress, a state, or a recognized Indian tribe. And you, in theory, you can't get Title IV unless you do that to prove that you have those things. Other examples of things that don't create authority to issue degrees include actions by professional licensing agencies. There are a few very, very rare exceptions out there. The most commonly known or mentioned is that in the state of California, the California Bar Association has the authority to oversee law schools in that state. So that's the basic intro to where we are with how state authorization works and what gives an entity the authority to issue degrees. The same process is true in most countries, except in most places it's much more centralized than it is in the US. And as I said earlier, for further information, for a lot more detail on some of the legal issues that are involved in these situations, the first half of the Sand Blue book that I mentioned earlier is something that you can look up. You can get that from Amazon. You can get it from Witchy. AACRAO may carry it too, I'm not sure. And with that, I think we'll move on from real schools to fake schools. And we will do that by going to the remarkably nasty world of what I call St. Reptile University, which my colleague George Gollin will tell you why sometimes government approval is not worth the paper it's forged on. So, George, we're ready for you to take over.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we have the slides ready to roll. Mike? Are you there? Okay, that's great.
I just had to, I had the image from the previous one I had to get rid of.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to talk about St. Regis University. Well, I'm going to talk about a criminal operation that got into Liberia at a time when Liberia was still in the throes of the Civil War. Next slide, please. It was run by Dixie and Steve Randock. They were criminals dabbling in insurance fraud, property theft, copyright infringement, bribery, and so forth and so on, all sorts of bad things. And they entered the degree mill industry in 1999. And by 2001, they created what was their magnum opus, named the St. Regis University. Next slide. There weren't any professors. In fact, there wasn't even a faculty roster until Dixie decided to use a photo editor and put some heads onto Richard Hoyer's body and build her faculty using a photo editor. She wasn't very good at it, as you can see. Okay, next. Now, they realized that real schools get government recognition, like Alan was describing, and they knew they're kind of copycats. They knew of one school, fake school, that had gotten into Liberia, so they decided to do the same thing. Liberia in 2002 was a nightmarish place where 1/10 of the population had died in the Civil War. Life expectancy was 39 years, and 1/7 of the babies died before they reached 1 year of age. Next. So Dixie sent a bankrupt former used car dealer who had been a boyfriend of hers in high school to Washington, D.C., and told Richard Novak to try to buy credentials from the Liberian government. Novak went, met with Abdullah Dunbar, who was the second in command, talked Dunbar down from $4 grand and came away with what purported to be authentic Liberian accreditation documents, and also the right to the authority to issue Liberian credentials to other diploma mills. Next. The Civil War in Liberia came to a close in late 2003. There were peace talks taking place in Accra, Ghana. So the Randox sent Novak Dunbar, the embassy official, and $7 grand to Africa to bribe officials. So the fellow on the right in the kind of the motorist cap is Prince Port. He became the ambassador to Nigeria. Lower right corner, that's Dunbar. Right, I'm sorry, that's Richard Novak right after he gave Cabinet Jané $1,000. Jané became the Minister of Justice and is currently a Supreme Court Justice. They were able to restaff embassies. That's Yahya, who is the foreign minister. Next slide. Jané, his assignment was to try to buy control of the University of Liberia, where the medical school is. That's the memorandum of understanding, Jané's initials on various changes, that says that he's going to receive a bunch of, basically a bank account to as an incentive. Next. So Dixie had put up a fake Liberian embassy website so she could list her schools, her diploma mills, as legitimate. The Liberian government actually let Dixie become the webmaster and made her fake website be the only website that the Liberian embassy had. Next slide. It was astonishing. I remember when that happened. So now St. Regis is a Liberian university. There was a campus photo of one of the branch schools, Robertstown, that's to the left. That's actually Blenheim Palace, which is Winston Churchill's birthplace. Next. The closest Dixie ever got to an on-the-ground presence was when the Liberians who were in her employ convinced her to open an office so they could claim they needed money for furniture, which they never bought. That's where St. Regis University is in Monrovia. Next. Randox landed on my radar, and I saw that they had created a take a test, get a degree webpage. So I decided I would see what happened. I took the test, made sure to get almost everything wrong, and they offered me an Associate of Arts degree for $1 grand. You see that the first question is, where does the President of the United States live, Oval Office, etc. So I posted the good news to the web, and Dixie saw my post and she went crazy. Next. The Randox, pretending to be Liberian officials, wrote to the University of Illinois, threatened lawsuits, and I thought, good, come and get us. But an associate provost then threatened to fire me unless I removed the material. They sent a surrender note to the Liberian embassy, knowing full well who they were really talking to. And here's Dixie's email telling her friends and coworkers that she won. Next. Contreras to the rescue. I joined the American Association of University Professors. Contreras took my material, posted it in Oregon, and then called the Chronicle of Higher Ed, which wrote 2 very embarrassing articles about the University of Illinois. The university backed down and apologized. Next. This got into the mainstream press then. Bill Moreland, the first reporter listed there, wrote about 24 articles over the course of several years. The Liberian embassy stopped supporting St. Regis, but then Dixie sent a whole lot more money to the embassy, and they retracted their disavowal. Okay, next. What really got them was there was a thug named Ishaq Shafiq, who actually has degrees from my campus. Shafiq got a bachelor's degree, moved to Georgia, sold 11 degrees to public school teachers, St. Regis degrees. They got big raises, like 10 grand typically. And then they got fired, lost their teaching licenses when the press got wind of it. Georgia officials wrote to the Washington Attorney General to ask her to get the Randox, and Gregoire ignored them. Shafiq then went to Indianapolis and sold over $200,000 in fake degrees to Chrysler workers that were at a factory about to close. An Indiana official complained to Gregoire, who also ignored him. Okay, next slide, please. So I wrote a long analysis of the Randox operation and sent it west. I think Alan got it actually to Gregoire's office. Gregoire ignored it. After 6 weeks, I sent everything, including the letters from Indiana and I guess Georgia, to Bill Moreland, who wrote a story saying that gubernatorial candidate Gregoire does not give a rat's ass about consumer protection. Gregoire almost lost the election. She won after 2 recounts by 129 votes. Pretty much everybody who voted against her must have seen Moreland's coverage, because that's really the main paper in Spokane. Okay, next. So Gregoire sent my report east to Spokane. The AG's office there opened an investigation, brought me in. That's the big chart. That's an org chart that I created for the investigative agencies to try to get more interest elsewhere. It was meant to scare the hell out of anybody who was thinking about whether it was worth paying attention to St. Regis. Okay, next. The feds, Operation Gold Seal, bought fake degrees. The most dramatic was they created an identity called Mohammed Syed, who was a Syrian army chemist and engineer looking for an H-1B visa, who also then later applied for a job at a US nuclear weapons facility. The Randox were quite happy to sell him everything he wanted to buy. Okay, next. The feds then created a fake diploma mill.
Okay. I found this on the web for Army chemist and engineer
sorry.
for H-1B visa. Who
Quiet
also
you. That was Siri getting interested in things. Okay, the feds created Randolph Addison Davis, a fake school, and arranged for Richard Novak to fly to Washington to discuss buying Liberian accreditation from him. Next. The meeting was held in the Mayflower Hotel, which is where Elliot Spitzer, as Client 9, ended his political career. The room was bugged. There were steerable cameras. And here is Abdullah Dunbar leaving the Liberian embassy, about to walk to the Mayflower Hotel to discuss how he wanted $5 grand to help them out. Okay, next. So that was quite a meeting. The meeting lasted 4.5 hours. I've seen the videotape of it. Gold Seal got search warrants, hit 7 Randox sites in 3 states. And the biggest prize was going to be the computers and the hard disks. Next. Here's a pre-raid briefing. There are a lot of people there. They came in really from all over the Western United States. I was out there several times. I was working with these people a lot. I got to know a bunch of them, and I just think the world of them. Okay, next. They went to Richard Novak first. He was living outside Phoenix to see if he could get Dixie to further incriminate herself. And he called Dixie, and she did. Next. This is one of my favorite pictures. They're going up the steps to Randox's house, guns out to search her place. Next. The house was full of guns, and there was even a hand grenade, thus the explosives technician in a bomb suit in the lower right. Next. Now, these people are going into a house full of guns, explosives perhaps, to protect higher education. They really, really, really deserve our thanks. The IT person was named Kenneth Pearson. Here, the St. Regis servers in various states of disrepair. Besides having the Diploma websites, Pearson was a lover of child pornography and had things sorted by the age of the victim. The youngest victims were in a folder labeled 0 to 6 months. So he was just bad in all sorts of ways. Next. Okay, the Randocks had hidden about 200 grand in a trunk in their backyard. They dug it up after the searchers left. Next. So I went back out to Spokane, discovered that Richard Novak did not realize that he needed to empty his deleted items folder manually in his computer. So I collected about 130,000 messages. There were nearly 9,000 messages from Novak there. There's stuff that is too crass for me to discuss here, but the original picture of the Ghanaian woman who Dixie turned into Tia had her not wearing that clothing. Next. Here are the Randocks to be going into the federal courthouse to be arraigned for mail fraud, wire fraud. Other people in their organization were charged with bribing foreign officials, child pornography, and so forth and so on. And the case went on for about 3 years of maneuvering. Okay, and we waited for the judge to decide on whether or not to dismiss evidence. So at the final sentencing hearings, the defense actually blamed me for the indictment. They said that I was personally profiting from the University of Illinois offering courses, and the Randocks were competitors, and so that's why I was going after them. And so I thought that was hysterically funny, and the judge did too. He had a nice smile when they said that. Next. Here's what their monthly income looked like. The graph actually only includes the sales that we could tag a date to. The total sales are about 20, 40, 30, 40% higher than what the graph shows. They made $7.3 million in revenue with nearly zero expenses except for bribes. Okay, next. They sold credentials globally, right? All over the place. Look at all those countries into which they sold their product. Next. So all 8 defendants pleaded guilty. 5 of them went to prison. Novak should have too, but he just had probation. He left the country. Next. The case generated a lot of publicity. CNN interviewed me a couple of times. They interviewed Jim McDevitt, who's there to my left. He was the U.S. attorney for Eastern Washington. Betty McCollum from the Minnesota 4th District saw the story, was alarmed. Next. So she drafted legislation with Tim Bishop and Raul Grijalva. It was House Resolution 773. It was a nice, straightforward bill that was going to make it harder to sell fake degrees. They didn't handle it right. It came into the awareness of everybody else in Congress as a bill put forward by 3 liberal Democrats. It should have been launched as a bipartisan effort, so they played it wrong, which is too bad. Next. There's a Wyoming problem. Wyoming was the home to Kennedy Western, the largest diploma mill in the US, I believe. And, Kennedy Western received a thrashing at Susan Collins hearings in 2004. But on the board were Judy Catchpole, former Wyoming superintendent of public education, and also Gay Woodhouse, who'd been Wyoming's attorney general, and she'd been an assistant US attorney, president of the Wyoming Bar Association, and they were making money hand over fist because of Kennedy Western's diploma mill activities. Next. But also on the federal level, Mike Enzi, he was the ranking member of Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And, he was from the senior senator from the state that had been getting a lot of donations from the owner of Kennedy Western. So I spoke to Enzi's staff on the help committee. They didn't see that there was a federal interest in suppressing the interstate sale of fake medical degrees, basically, and I was shocked. What came out of conference was gutted, and there was nothing but a weak and easily circumvented definition of the term diploma mill. I believe from just conversations with staffers that the Department of Education was complicit in this. They didn't want to have to deal with the problem. I was horrified. You know, these folks, the Randocs, they're killing people. And NT doesn't give a rat's anatomical part. Okay, next, please. So I've left out a lot of the story. I mean, it's just full of things that are just amazing to me. I've got a long manuscript about it, but the whole thing was just remarkable. And here are people who are not higher ed types going in to try to protect higher education. The U.S. Attorney's Office felt that this was maybe the most complex and also most significant course prosecution their office had ever undertaken. Liberia is somewhat cleaned up, but you know, Liberia is still in rough straits, but not nearly as bad as it was back then. So I think that being able to nail the Randocs has played a small role in making things better there. Okay, next. And that is that. Goodbye, St. Regis. All right, so thank you. You know, I'm a physics professor, right? I'm an elementary particle physicist who does instrumentation for various useful societal things, and this was something entirely outside of my usual kind of activities. Okay, so I think next we have Alan Ezel, who was actually paid for his efforts to have her diploma mills and has the horrifying story of Axact to tell us about.
Thank you, George. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the fact that you're here this afternoon. Axact is a story that is definitely worth the telling. First of all, I welcome all of our viewers, including those from Axact in Pakistan. I understand there's several people from Pakistan signed up for today. The people working at Axact and PCARV work at a criminal enterprise. Someday it'll all catch up with them, and they should always remember Allah. As always, we need new sources of information, both myself and others involved in this and the FBI. So if they would be in touch with AACRAO in Washington and ask for them to pass on a message to us, that would be great. I'm going to take 25 years of Axact, and I have about 12 and a half minutes. So it's important that you come back to this PowerPoint presentation later. While it's on the internet, copy it all, put it in your binders. In 1982, well, let me back up. Protect your institution and yourself. The webinar registration page has links to all the articles that I've been doing on Axact. Please get those, copy those, put that in your binder. Go to degreemills.com. We have no books to sell. They're all out of print. Click on the Axact button. Everything, including an FIA, First Information Report. They call it a FIR. That's similar to the FBI. It has various universities, 9 accreditors, 30 more accreditors, 35 bank accounts, 92 general DM red flags, and 71 red flags specific for Axact. In 1982, Hazel Ben, a retired colonel in the U.S. Marine Corps, was the executive director of AACRAO. She brought me into AACRAO for the 1984 Denver annual meeting. The rest is history. That's why I'm here today. 40 years later, we're still working on it. She died December 16, 2004 at age 85 in Vermont, was buried in Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. She was quite a lady to be with. Her heart was truly in education. She left several scholarships for students. In 1982, I met Brenda Crabb, an orange-haired beauty at FBI headquarters, and we dated for several years. She was my first love. She later left the FBI, entered American University, and upon graduation, married her fellow classmate, James Fellenbaum. She began teaching at an elementary school and raised 3 children. She really enjoyed being a teacher. I got a call in 1996 from another agent telling me that she had died at age 53 from ovarian cancer and was cremated. I admire her tenacity and the way She battled the disease for 2 years, having chemotherapy. She was concerned with those around her, not herself. Let's keep our days normal and make each day count, is what she wanted. She died peaceably because she knew she would be buried literally at her father's foot, at his feet. I'm sensitive to this because last year I had cancer with radiation treatments. And ironically, Brenda's husband died 10 years later with cancer. So here I've had cancer. A lot of my friends have had cancer, but I had never looked it up. Well, when I looked up the definition, there were 2 definitions of cancer. One of those, as cancer wrecks the body, diploma mills eat away at the fabric of legitimacy, which accompanied earned academic credentials. This type of cancer devalues legitimate, hard-earned academic degrees. Even more worrisome for those students who leave school burdened by large amounts of school debt. I view Axact and now T-Curve in Karachi as a cancer that's at work 24/7. And it's going today. Axact meets the definition of a criminal enterprise. It is similar to an organized crime family, easy to get in, almost impossible to get out alive. The more money you make for them, the more they want you to stay, even offering bounties or rewards on you. They will go to great lengths to keep you. Axact was founded in 1997 by Shob Ahmed Sheikh, now age 49, and one of his brother-in-laws, Vitus Aki. The other 9 founders are all close relatives. Their motto, let's keep it all in the family. Your question would be, how big is this operation? It's unbelievable. I know that they have at least 4,700,000 customers worldwide. That's not purchaser, that's a customer. They could buy anywhere from 1 to 4 diplomas, so you could do the math. 700,000 in the United States of America alone. Again, you can multiply that by 1-4 as to how many pieces of paper they bought. Historically, the USA accounts for about 29% of Axact sales, with 59% for the Gulf region. They reached the $1 billion annual sales mark in 2014. Diplomas have sold for as little as $199, one of the early ones, and I'll show you some of that in a minute, to $25,000. And then that's just the beginning. The upsell is when, about a month after you purchase, this is when they call you to blackmail you, extortion, threats. Anything is fair. I have seen up to $1,400,000 US from one victim alone. I'm having a problem. Would you please advance that slide, please? Oh, okay, we're at the next one already. If you go out and look at the Axact.com site today, you will see that they have goals. They talk about being in 120 countries, 23 products, 2 billion users, 40 million paying customers. Think about that. How much paper does it take to generate that kind of money? 100,000 employees and associates is what they have claimed to have vaccinated. They're now saying that global is our new local. The global presence in 120 countries, 1,300 cities, with more than 45,000 employees and associates. Previously, it was 25,000. I think that's a lie. On a good day, I think the most they've got around the world is about 2,500. And with global sales of, I believe, 7 or 8 billion that they're looking for. You must read the exact site. Get used to the verbiage, because this is what you're going to see on the fake schools that you read. Always, always check whois.com for the true data created and registration. I'm getting all these pop-ups on the right side and in the middle. Okay, I'm sorry. And the registration data, or whether it's hidden. Next. Back up, please. Thank you. The Shob Sheikh is on the upper left. Rose petals in the middle. That's a sign of love and worship that they were throwing on him. I love the picture, the third one in. It shows Shob Sheikh handcuffed. So you have the CEO and the CFO handcuffed together, okay? and when they're headed to court in the bottom towards the left side. On the far left, you have their chartered accountant, similar to a CPA, but not. He is the bagman. That's why I have it in green. Can you imagine having a cash payroll for 1,000+ employees? What the logistics are on that much cash and the number of guards and everything that you have around you. And you'll see a picture of Vidas Aki, the co-founder, the CFO. And the picture on the right-hand side is Akash, and all this is blocked out with our faces and everything. Okay, Akash is behind the 4 red stars. He is the person that's in charge of all the fake colleges. That is his job. He is the boss, okay? And then you have the HR guy in the bottom right. Again, I can't see a lot of these. Would you, next slide, please. In my 40 years investigating diploma mills, I have never seen any place that pays more than 1,000 employees in cash, grosses $2 billion, and aspires to gross $8 billion. They had a 1-week amnesty program a year ago for prior thefts. Anything that you had stole, they would work it out with you. Normally, you get beat, and if you survive, you then get handed over to the cops, and they raid your home. They have a company song, talent contest, monthly magazine, health insurance, not only for you, but your mother, father, and the whole family. Generators and bottled water delivered to your house, a corporate yacht, beach house, swimming pool, and a bedroom adjacent to the CEO's office. You get the picture on that one. They hire many former lieutenant colonels and colonels from the Pakistan Army. Prayer rooms, 3 for men, 1 for women. And I don't know what military occupational specialty there is that gives you the experience and knowledge to then go work at the world's biggest degree mill. Next, please. The red flags, okay, in the last 90 days, I've looked at probably 45 different schools. And I've got to stop and mention right now, one of these new ones, and I about fell down when I saw this, is the Ronald Reagan University. Ronald Reagan University. All these things that I was looking at in a cram situation, they're all open 24/7. They hide behind third-party registrations on domains. Look for Russian and Iceland servers. Reserve your scholarship. 75% scholarships available. No street address, domestic telephone numbers, errors, grammar, wrong school name in the text. Copyright 10 to 15 years before the school was even registered on the internet. Good luck. They all state we're the world's largest online university, or 2 lines down, we're the world's largest university. Invest in your future, and you'll see the logo of IELA. That's a signal. Next, please. Okay, some stats. 10,000 plus websites in the last 25 years. I know of about 2,000 or 2,500. Probably 500 to 800 active today. 200 to 400 fake accreditors and support organizations. 200 to 500 landing pages. That's sort of like the old-fashioned sticky flypaper, where the spider webs are, and this is how the people get trapped. 2013 and 14, they received 5,000 telephone calls a day, and the buy rate, the purchase rate, was 40%. They have about 30 to 50 bank accounts, all in US dollars, in a number of countries, heavily in the United States, and the money is being laundered by numerous persons referred to as directors, who in turn hire other money mules, even in our country. Don't kid yourself till you've seen this list of banks. Next, please. On the right-hand side, behind all the people's faces, is the old Exact Tower. And, you know, when your name is burned and everybody realizes what you are, then you change your names. Now we became Crest. So now on the left, you'll have the Crest Tower. Now, both of those are filled with vultures. These are the towers of lies, and that's what their own employees have called them. And remember, with the pig, you can dress it up, you can change its clothes, put some perfume on it, do whatever. But a pig is a pig, and it's still going to stink. And the same thing applies here. Next, please. This is the sign that's outside the elevator at the headquarters of Exact. Those are the different companies. So now Exact doesn't exist, but all these other companies do. Same employees sitting at their desk. The only thing that changed was their building pass. So on floors 2, 5, 6, 7 in the mezzanine, that's where all the fake schools are. And the one that really grabs me is the brand management. We're running a criminal organization with no exportable legal product, and we have brand management. Our brand, it's all fake. It's all smoke and mirrors. Next, please. This is one of their advertisements, live larger than life. They sell what you don't have in life. You don't have clean water, we'll give it to you. We have electricity problems, we'll give you a generator. We've got an on-site physician. We've got a salon to do your hair. We've got a 5-star cafeteria. They sell that, and then it's tough to leave. You've swallowed the hook. Next, please. Historically, every one of the sites has a chat line button. In the old days, the lady on the left in green was what we saw. Now we're seeing the lady in the orange on the right. Next, please. This is what I call vintage one, their first involvement with degree mills. Here, they would tell you this is the 199 degree and maybe up to 399, and they would tell you the number of pieces of paper you got. That made it worthwhile more. 1 original accredited degree, 1 transcript, 1 award of excellence, certificate of distinction, certificate of membership, education verification letters. You've never seen the people. They don't know you, you don't know them, but this is what your degree package was. Next, please. What's at the other end of the 888 or similar toll-free number that you call for the school? In the center picture, that is just one of the many squads. And here they were being honored for 1,000% growth. 1,000%. Think about that one. 1,000%. How much more do you have to sell? What pressure is on you? What lie will you not tell? So when your phone is answered, it's answered by one of the call center teams over here on the left. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of these. There are large floors, 30, 40,000 square feet, nothing but call center people. So it's answered by the people on the left, manned by these people in the middle, and the whole thing is in a server on the right. That takes care of the whole school. No faculty, no facilities, no nothing. This is what your school is. Next, please. And remember the word virtual, which means almost. This is the upper portion of the United States Capitol. Just remember what it looks like. Next, please. And in all of the material that I've been reading in the last couple months, these are just websites that I found, not the total. I don't know everything. I may lucky to know only 15 or 20% of their operation. But look at this. Here's one, Joe Biden scholarship, Joe Biden scholarship, Joe Biden scholarship, instant. And then Joe Biden scholarship, 5 of those with Joe Biden, okay? And look at the US Capitol. They love red, white, and blue. Next, please. Credential evaluation. Jasmin knows much about that. But look at this. There are 3 of their organizations, Educational Credential Investigation, Global, and then World. These are pictures from their website. And like it says, we evaluate your credentials or else. You're going to lose your job, deported, jailed, everything. And this is on their website. And you can see the dress on the middle one with the clothing he has on. They're targeting the Arab countries right there. Unbelievable. And this is right out there on the web to see. And they will put the screws to you financially like you've never seen before. Next, please. And they brag. 2 days ago, I got this University of California counterfeit at Berkeley. University of California at Berkeley counterfeit. And this document over here that's CHIA International Quality Group acknowledges. And both of these are done there at Axact. So I'm telling you, they're not only doing fictitious schools that you've got to watch for, and sometimes they'll change the name of a real school by 1 letter, and you better catch it. Not only are they doing that, they're doing counterfeits on real schools. And this is a nice looking University of California diploma. However, the governor's wrong on it by the date of graduation that they picked. And then you have a CHIA document with all the embassy seals and stamps. Next, please. Axact and T-Curve employees defraud anyone, anytime, anywhere, for anything, as long as they get US dollars. Defraud the frail, the weak, the downtrodden, the refugees, or the strong. They don't care. They have no conscience. They've been told in their orientation class, there are no laws on the internet. That's what they've been told. So I'm free to do whatever I want. They hustle. My Swedish colleagues, and I thank them for being here today. They have told me that Axact hustles a package of fake documents, and they refer to it as the migration package to the Syrian refugees. They will put the squeeze to anybody and take their last nickel. Next, please. A prayer room. There are 3 for the men, 1 for the women. So here you are defrauding people around the world with lies and everything. Then you walk down the hall and pray 5 times a day. Now, I'm sorry. I have a hard time with all this. And they better watch for lightning striking. Next, please. Over there, the police can hold you for investigation. They can hold you for a long time for investigation and talk to you and talk to you and talk to you, which they did to the CEO, Shob Sheikh. And after he'd been held for about 5 days, at midnight, he told them where the printing plant was, and he gave them directions and pointed it out to them when they drove there. They knocked over the printing plant at midnight. They took 2,200,000 diploma transcripts and student IDs. And these are some pictures that they took inside. And then the director of the FIA then held a press conference on their front doorstep. That's the picture on the right. So 2,200,000 pieces of paper. I thought 30,000 that I took was a lot, but here 2,200,000, just to give you an idea of the size of this daggone place. Next, please. Red, white, and blue, everything you can think of, they will bastardize it in 2 seconds. This is what you're going to be finding on all their websites. Remember, all these are American schools. Therefore, we've got to go the red, white, and blue. Next, please. This is Must, M-U-S-T, Must University, their bestseller. And I still can't believe that people went with this one. But either way, this was used at a mail drop in San Francisco. And I think, John, your next speaker, has either been inside that mail drop or sat across the street watching it with some reporters. And look, they say a presence in 180 countries. And look at this line, scholarship grants for students in, and they didn't fill in the daggone name. These are the type of errors you're going to see that you want to pay attention to on the real websites. And this one is still out there. I took this off the web within a week, and it's still there with blanks. So pay attention. Next, please. Regrettably, as long as the Pakistan government supports, condones Axact, they will be with us. You must protect yourself. Axact T-curve is like an iceberg. I've only given you a brief glimpse of the top ice. You must get everything I have written, like we talked about, make a binder, put it in there, the documents from different sources, and then study that, pass it around, and protect your people, because they're going to keep selling this trash forever. No one's going to stop them. If the government allows it, law enforcement allows it, their intelligence agencies allow it, why stop? It's free money. I thank you for watching, and don't forget the Bogus Institutions and Documents book that AACRAO has published. I hope that you've gotten something out of this today. Next slide, please. And I give you next himself, John Bear, my mentor, and he refers to me as Grasshopper. So John, the man with the white flag, you're on. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alan, and everybody else. This is really an extremely important moment for me. I was very pleased to be invited to say a few words to AACRAO people, and the thought did enter my mind that this would be a good time to announce my retirement from the world of higher education, and especially from commentary on the world of degree mills and other fake schools. But I've changed my mind. You get a sense of where things are from the first 3 speakers. So this is not my retirement, but from my perspective, the bad guys have won. And so this is my moment of surrender, not retirement. I give up. I first published information on degree mills in a 1961 paper rather amazing 61 years ago, and I pointed with distress and alarm at some of the terrible things that were going on with the hope of somehow making a difference, that things would be made better. And 61 years later, things are worse than they have ever been because of huge infusions of international investment, skilled marketing, and the power of the internet. Over these 61 years, I have done everything I could think of to call attention to the problem. I've had the pleasure of speaking at AACRAO 5 times, appearing as an expert on 60 Minutes twice, Good Morning America 7 times, and Inside Edition, testifying as an expert in state and federal courts, speaking out at many national conventions, talking to an endless number of journalists, lawyers, human resource officials, state and federal agencies, and anyone else who would listen, always making the case that fake schools and fake degrees were a terrible blight on the world of higher education, and something must be done. And the result is that things are worse than they have ever been. I am so very tired of seeing my efforts go for naught. I am so very tired of seeing that the tireless work of my colleagues on this webinar have had only a most modest effect. Goodness knows, Alan Ezell has done great work in his FBI and post-FBI years, helping to learn about and to expose the fake degree programs from Pakistan and elsewhere. Goodness knows George Gollin has succeeded where others failed in getting the US Secret Service off the dime and involved in the world of fake schools with its splendid work against St. Regis. Goodness knows Alan Contreras has been a significant factor in getting his fellow state education officers interested in doing something about the bad schools in their states. And yet, the situation today is worse than it has ever been. I am so tired of having so very little effect. I am so tired of having been sued 7 times already by the various perpetrators of these frauds. I am so tired of having been harassed mercilessly by the fake school operators. And so I have decided, instead of retiring from higher education, I am herewith going to surrender. I'm done. I'm out of here. So in my final few minutes as a world famous higher education expert, I'd like to spend just a little time trying to explain and analyze how I think things have reached this terrible state. There are 2 factors in operation. I'll call them the sumptuary factor and the Fagin factor. Sumptuary laws are often defined as those relating to so-called victimless crimes. Gambling, for instance, is widely regarded as a victimless crime. In this period of March Madness approaching, something like 100 million people are going to be betting on basketball games. Billions of dollars, totally illegal almost everywhere. But hey, where's the harm? Drugs, of course, another extremely widespread, mostly illegal, so-called victimless crime. Tell that to the Mexican warlords. And the consumption of alcohol among young people and in illegal jurisdictions, well, we all know how well prohibition worked. Sex crimes of every possible variety, victimless, they say. And finally, in the sumptuary pantheon, there is the matter of fake schools, fake degrees. Is there really that much harm being done by the users of these degrees, the teachers, the lawyers, the architects, the psychologists, the marriage counselors, the therapists, and literally millions of others? Is it really such a bad thing that more than half More than half of all new PhDs being used in America are from fake schools? Gee, I think so, but an awful lot of people don't. And that is helping to propel my imminent surrender. Finally, I mentioned what I called the Fagin factor. You'll remember Fagin as the evil character in Dickens who taught young boys how to be clever and successful pickpockets and thieves. What Fagin did, I think of as a two-step crime. First, he was a criminal, and second, he sent more criminals out into the world, doing far more harm than any one person could do. How common is this? Let me give you a couple of quick examples. First, on the internet, and again in Soldier of Fortune magazine, there are advertisements for people who will sell you a complete set of ignition keys, which will open and start just about all popular makes and models of cars. With each sale, they are turning each of their clients into criminals. And next, you can buy a book right now, today, published in Colorado, with the wonderful title, How Dishonest People Cheat Their Electric Companies by Rigging Their Power Meters. Is this okay? With each sale, they are turning one of their customers into a criminal. And finally, relevant for this moment, there is the matter of fake schools and fake degrees. I rejoiced when Alan Ezell and the FBI got into the diploma mill arena. After 10 years of excellent, clever work, dozens of fakes had been identified and closed down and their operators dealt with. One expert, I think it was me, declared at that time that we had turned the corner in dealing with fake schools. And from that day to this, things have only gotten worse, much worse. I rejoiced again when a prominent congressman launched a national investigation of degree mills, discovering, among much else, 5,000 fake medical doctors currently practicing, 5,000. We must have legislation, Congressman Pepper declared. Nothing happened, and things have only gotten worse. Repeat scenario, the only time a US senator got briefly outraged by the problem. We must have national legislation, said Senator Collins, and things have only gotten worse. Is there really that much harm in the Fagin approach, the two-step crime? Is it really such a big deal that a teacher at your local high school turns out to have a fake degree, or a senior member of the president's cabinet found to have a fake degree, who responded when approached by Good Morning America that my job doesn't require a degree, and besides, I'm playing golf with the president this afternoon, so what's your problem? How about the sex therapist in upstate New York who bought his medical degree for $100? The architect who designed a skyscraper that collapsed, killing over 100 people. I really am pleased that AACRAO and my friends on this panel will continue to do good work, calling attention to all that is wrong in higher education and degrees, but not me. In the splendid words of Robert Ruark's 1956 best-selling book, Nothing Works and Nobody Cares. And that is why I am giving up. That is why I am surrendering. People may wonder whether tomorrow morning or 10 years from now, whatever happened to old John Bear? He used to speak out against fake schools and fake degrees, but I hear that he surrendered. Let it be said that he was a victim of what I will call the Kitty Genovese syndrome. You may remember that young woman who, as the story goes, was stabbed to death in the doorway of her apartment house with dozens of people looking on from the balconies who did nothing. Is there some basic flaw in the human character that causes people to behave this way? Or is it, as my wife, a professional ethicist, has said, we've chosen the wrong planet? So there you have it. In the words, or paraphrasing the words of our 37th president, you won't have John Bear to kick around anymore. I surrender. Bye-bye.
Wow. Thank you for that, John. Thank you to all our presenters, Alan Contreras, Alan Ezell, George Gollin, and John Bayer. I cannot underscore how valuable this information has been, even for someone like me who's been in this field for decades. And John, we will never surrender. We will follow in your path and use the information that you've shared. I mean, the valuable tools you've all left for us. We have a
Invite me
lot.
back in 16 years, I'll be 100.
I will be working with you telepathically. We will all, because we cannot. This is why we have these presentations. We will have these over and over again. We need to share this information. We need to keep our colleagues awake and alert. And there are tools available. The publication that AACRAO has in its bookstore is ready. It's full, chock full of information. We've decided to go a little bit over, so if those of you want to stay on, please do. We have a couple of questions. I would love to open these questions and run them by our panelists. Our first question is from an attendee from the UK. The question is, I'm guided by the UK's quality body for higher education, and as an academic of a UK university that protects and values this brand, I would like to know how best we can do that by identifying and dealing with plagiarism and contract purchasing situations. We use Turnitin and authorship, which together with our academics' attention to reading scripts are what are, I guess, the question kind of ended there, but what do you think that they can use in terms of dealing with plagiarism and other sorts of purchasing, publishing that happens? You mentioned something about PhDs. How many people have purchased fake doctorates? We see that a lot in our evaluation work. We see a lot of these sort of fraudulent PhDs. So where do they get these research? How can we combat that? Yes, George, go ahead.
Let me make a comment on that. Okay, so you're interested in, because I'm a teaching faculty member, right? So you're interested in identifying plagiarism done by students at different levels. These academic integrity investigations are very time consuming. We've got at least one going on and I hear about it at my university. So how to deal with it? I think things start with the advisor. Give support to the academic advisor so that if there is a concern that there's a plagiarized thesis, the administration has to jump in and be very, very supportive and very helpful in providing the sometimes technical means for evaluating this. But they are quite time consuming, and so you need to have the professors know that they're not going to get hammered when the plagiarist's older relatives, physician in the West Coast, weigh in and start making threats. So the administrations have to be very supportive of the faculty. The faculty and the thesis committee are the first line of defense in detecting plagiarism in a thesis, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, George. Another question is, yes, John, go ahead. You wish to add.
The Turnitin, which this you were mentioning, is a wonderful plagiarism detector, but that's one at a time. Look at Alan Ezell's numbers, 4 million people. You're not going to get, and most of them buying the degrees willy-nilly online.
Yeah.
The best thing the UK ever did so far was to restrict the use of the word university. Unless you have the Royal Charter or other permission, you can't call yourself a university. But you can still call yourself a college, or you can call yourself anything you want as long as you're operating from Pakistan or Chicago or anywhere else. I have a diploma from Cambridge University. It was printed in the state of Oregon, and nobody in the UK cares.
Yeah.
I should mention that some states including Oregon, also restrict use of the term university. That's a protected word that you can't use here. I think what John has from Oregon is probably fairly old, but it's illegal to call yourself a university in Oregon unless you meet certain standards.
Yeah, thank you. And I know, just based on the research I've been doing, just as much that there are diploma mills have now also created their own accreditation organizations. So we call them accreditation mills. And by virtue of that, they've also set up their own evaluation services. So this is many layered, and it does put us on call that we can't take anything on face value anymore. And even as we saw with the situation in Liberia, we can also see that authorities that we have rested on, our trust and confidence, as the ministries of education and so forth, they can also be targets of diploma mills and be quote unquote bought. Another question, let's see. To combat the actual use of fake degrees, there is the Degree Verify with Clearinghouse. This is a comment from Alan Cole. He also says, but how much do employers and others actually verify a degree for an employee? Is there education still needed for the employers or others?
Yeah, may I?
Yes, George.
Two things going on. One is that a lot of employers don't know that, but what many of us have found is a very common reaction is to immediately try to cover it up so that the employer will not get in trouble for having hired someone with a fake degree. So yeah, education is important. I think the kind of thing you can do is point out that if you have hired into your medical practice someone whose credentials are fake, you are incredibly exposed for liability when that person proves not to be holding a legitimate degree. Yeah, I think you really have to deal with this, not so much by incentives as an enormous stick. People have to lose their jobs. People have to be sued by this. But we kept seeing this in government officials with fake degrees. Whoever hired them says, Nanya's Nayu. I know nothing. Okay.
Thank you. Very true. Yes, John.
My friend Richard Douglas did his legitimate PhD research on the topic of how human resource executives deal with evaluating schools. He did lengthy interviews with 300 HR people at major corporations, Fortune 1000, and his research can be summed up in one word: clueless. These people did not know, with rare exceptions, they did not know and they did not care that there were fake degrees out there. I just find that very depressing, but the Richard Douglas dissertation is available, and it's had no effect. So
if I could add,
the people who should know are clueless.
True.
do I have time to add something to that?
Please go ahead, Al.
There are two really good law review articles done by a woman named Creola Johnson on the exact issue of HR departments that don't pay attention. One of them has the great title, you pretend to have a degree that they pretend to require. And I can get at least the citations to these to AACRAO to share out with everybody.
Thank you for that. Definitely. The resources are available for everyone. And but I think this is a discussion that we need to continue, and hope to have more of these informative webinars shared by colleagues. There's a question coming up. Let's see. When we identify fake transcripts, degrees, or diplomas, is there someone we should report them to? Huh, I wish.
Well,
Go ahead.
Give it to your local newspaper.
Mhm.
If you have a problem with somebody in a position of responsibility who has one of these things, you probably aren't going to have the ability to enforce anything against anybody. But the news media gave me 90% of my victories because they absolutely love these stories. And
It's
anybody
true.
with a fake credential, you don't have to do any work. And in the United States, they basically can't be sued, and neither can you.
It's true. I know Alan and I just did a interview with the Hetchinger report, and they were doing a whole expose on diploma mills.
This
And
is
just-
Alan. Can you hear me?
Yes, Alan.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. I have a screen that's no longer
That's
our
okay.
screen, but it's a Zoom screen. One of the things, there is an online report, a complaint that you can file with the FBI. The benefit of filing that matter, that false document being used by somebody somewhere is, number one, they will index that name.
Yes.
And you nor I know how that person is going to be maybe going for a security clearance or something, and that would pop up. Plus, they are the mothership of these documents coming in from everywhere. They will see patterns that you and I don't see because we don't know the entire universe. So do that online white collar crime complaint form, and I've forgotten the form number. I've been working with certain people that were exact victims, if you would, I mean, significant victims, and cooperating with me. And then later, when they completed that form, I had already talked to the FBI and said, hey, watch for so-and-so. And about a month later, that form then arrives on that agent's desk because he's the one that's handling the exact case, okay? So do that form and submit it.
That's spot on, Alan. You're so correct. We have on occasion, when we've come across fraudulent documents or diploma mills, reported them to the FBI, and they actually, that's exactly what they told us, that they're not going to take an immediate action, but it goes in the database. And this, you know, if this individual comes through again or some other activities that they've been involved with, this is a red flag. So that's terrific. And just speaking from an evaluation company perspective, our membership with the Association for International Credential Evaluators requires us to notify the members within the organization when we have encountered a case such as this, so that none of us become a target, that we are on guard, we're aware, but and in addition to notification of the FBI. And if we can, report it to some local journals or newspapers. Usually they come to us if they're doing a cover story, but you know, if there's small minor issues, they really don't they don't really respond, but we do the best we can. Let's see. Can we do another question before we wrap up from our technical support? I think we have.
If the panel has time for one more, then we can do one more.
Thank you. Let me just see if there's one more here. What about degrees that are issued by real universities that haven't been earned? Case in point is, let's say, someone from Russia. Mike, would you like to answer that? I saw, oh, I guess that question disappeared.
It just
Oh,
the
yeah.
answer column, but it's yeah, it's still there.
Okay, well, the question was that what about degrees that are that people have that are from legitimate universities, but they have been falsified, meaning they never attended, but they've recreated, and that we've seen, that happens frequently.
I have some thoughts if you'd like them.
Yes, please.
It's called false pretense, and every state has those statutes, fraud and false pretense. So number one, you've got a state violation. Number two, just about anything in this world is available for sale on the internet. When AACRAO gave me the budget to do the counterfeits, I bought 8 diplomas with transcripts for less than $2,000, even buying University of Florida, 1 or 2 law schools, University of Oregon, Johns Hopkins, some real quality schools with transcripts, anything. And it doesn't have to come from Russia, but and if it's not listed or any other thing you want, negotiate with them, and within 24 hours, you've got it.
It's correct. And
you only know it's false if you put a real one next to it, like we did in the book. We put my daughter's real Florida transcript with my fake Florida transcript, and then you would instantly know. But absent having the benchmark, you wouldn't know.
Thank you for that. One example I can state is Iran. The Ministry of Education has set up a verification site for credentials because about a couple of years ago, there was a sting operation where they discovered that some criminal gang had actual blank degree diplomas and transcripts from various universities in Iran. And they were selling those to candidates. Of course, the students hadn't attended those universities, but they were leaving with legitimate diplomas for studies they didn't complete.
Certainly.
So the ministry has set up this verification site. So there
And
are these measures that have been set up by various countries to help with verification.
You remember
Yes.
Toro University
Yes.
in New York City.
Exactly.
Classic example, an inside straight.
Exactly. Well, we have gone over. I know this is such a great topic that we could go on forever. And I hope we have more of this. Again, my big thanks to our presenters. Really deeply appreciate your presence today. You are the four our four superheroes. So really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone joining us today for your comments, for engaging with us. Just terrific chats going on. Let's all work together. Let's stay aware. Let's be vigilant, and let's not surrender. Definitely not. Thank you,
for the
everybody.
opportunity.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Corinne.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.